Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. My name is Naomi, the How To Chick, and it's hot outside. And I'm glad to be here this evening. I want to give you guys a few seconds to get in the room because I'm talking about something that I think is something that a lot of parents have struggled with. And I'm talking about consistency. So let me just throw it on out there. I'm talking about consistency, why it's important, why it's imperative, and why structure and consistency are some of the best predictors of outcomes in our parenting. We know that doing anything consistently, if we as parents, if we as humans could be consistent in everything we do, we'd be a lot more successful. But today I'm only here to talk about consistency in parenting, small scope, why it's so important, and why when we fail to provide structure and consistency, we create patterns in our children that are probably patterns we've tried to break in ourselves. If this is your first time catching one of my lives, my name is Naomi. I go by the How To Chick. I'm a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. And I believe that you can do anything, but you can't do everything, and you must choose wisely. I typically come on Wednesday nights to talk a little bit about life, a little bit about relationships, most importantly, the relationships that we have with God and ourselves. And tonight I want to talk a little bit about consistency and why it is so important to maintain consistency in parenting. Um, I have five kiddos in varying ages, and summer is here. And this is our first summer trying to not have all the younger kids in camp all the time. And I have to admit, last week, which is our first full week out of school, if you're on the West Coast or in the South, you're probably aghast because I know school got out in May. But here, we did not get out until Monday, June 17th or 18th, whatever that was. And last week was the first, again, full week out of school, and the kids were being the kids, sleeping in, making a mess, playing around because summer camp didn't start until this week. And I was kind of losing my mind because, of course, the house is a mess. Things are everywhere. Nobody's ready to eat dinner at dinner time. And I've always kind of run a very structured home for my own sanity. I've talked before about my ADHD and why structure and routine are super important for me. But I wanted to talk about why they're so important for our children, why consistency is actually imperative. Um, if even if you have very, very young children, as a matter of fact, most importantly, if you have very, very young children, clear structure, expectations, those things provide the limits and the boundaries that help children predict how you're going to react to something that they do. And it also teaches them how to behave in any given circumstance. But what consistency really means is not that we do the same thing at the same time every single day. I mean, that nobody lives their lives like that. What consistency means is that we actually follow through with what we say we're going to do. Structure and routine are important, but nothing is infallible. And, this isn't, a Navy ship. So anyone with small children knows it's almost impossible to keep to an exact schedule. But consistency means follow through. It means resisting the urge to make your life a little easier by granting that extra hour of screen time because you don't want to hear the screams. It means resisting the urge to avoid punishing a child that you've already given their two or three, whatever your warning system is, warnings. To impose discipline is not necessarily to beat, to give a timeout, to whatever. It is sometimes to allow a natural consequence. And that's where I'm going. But consistency means that whatever it is that you've said you're going to do, whatever rule you have, whatever standard you have for your household, that you're applying it consistently. And this means, yes, even across children. So if there is a house rule with a house consequence and consistently it's applied to one person but not the other, to one child and not the other, that's going to create resentment, and sneakiness. Structure and routines help children understand what the logical next steps are going to be when things happen, and they help them learn how to control their own behaviors. When we are not consistent, we create behaviors like lying, triangulation, manipulation, and sneakiness. Consistency helps prevent that. And guys, I didn't come on here to give a parenting lecture tonight. I came on here to remind us, me, that even when it's uncomfortable, even when it is an inconvenience to me based on what I would prefer to be doing or what I feel like I need to be doing, consistency requires that I get up and do the hard thing because parenting is hard. Consistency creates behaviors, and it also creates an understanding of what the real rules are. How many of us have seen rules posted someplace, say school or job, and we know which rules we can break and which rules we can't because we see which ones are consistently enforced? Kids learn by what we do. And so even if we have had a pattern in the past of not having a consistent bedtime, of not having consistent structures around chores, of not enforcing the requirement that children do their bedtime routine, whatever that is in your home, you can start at any point, but you have to be consistent. If you've never been consistent with anything, it's important to start small. Start with 2 or 3 priority behaviors, priority discipline techniques. Let's just say you want to give your kids chores, but they've never had them. Start with, we're all going to clean our rooms together. So you go in and you help them, you get their room clean, you give them a checklist. These are the things you do every day in your room. You have to make your bed. You have to get your toys up off the floor. You have to put your clothes in the hamper. You have to put your books on the bookshelf. 5 or less. Small changes. And then you decide, right, what the consequence is going to be. Now, there may be no consequence other than the fact that they end up having to do it, right? But you decide what the rule is. For example, if you don't have your room cleaned up before dinner, then you don't get to have a dessert. Or, I mean, that might be a bit much, but what I'm saying is you decide for your house what the requirement is and stick with it. Stick with it every day, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to. And remind them of it. Say, I don't want to do this, but you know what the rule is. Have family meetings. This is a big thing. And I have to say this again for myself because we need to have a new one this summer. My kids are getting older. We haven't had a family meeting in a while. Expectations, roles, responsibilities, and chores have changed. We need to have a family meeting to determine what the consequences are when some of the younger ones are not doing their chores and the older ones are feeling resentment because they're doing theirs and they're seeing that there's not really follow through, right, with the younger ones because we know that we haven't properly trained them to do these chores that they're assigned. So, family meetings, communication, making sure they have the tools, starting routines. Routines are so incredibly helpful. And I'm, again, preaching to the choir because I've done these forever. And over the last week, I noticed that when I decided that because the kids were out of school and they'd done a full school year, everybody was, on a roll and all that jazz. So I was like, I'm going to let them have a free week. They can go to bed whenever they want. They can get up whenever they want. It was chaos and I hated it. And it was only 1 week. Routines eliminate power struggles. If you have that kid that will not go to bed, if you have that kid that never wants to eat their dinner, if you have that kid that won't get up in the morning, if you have that kid that's always sneaking around, routines help you to eliminate power struggles. And I'm not saying they're going to go 100% away. I promise you they won't, but it will get easier because it will give them a sense of security and self accountability. They become responsible for themselves because they want to avoid the consequence or natural consequence, whatever it may be, of what's going to happen. If I tell you you need to be in bed by 9:30, I tuck you in, and then you get up and read all night, I don't want to hear it when I come get you up at 8 o'clock the next morning. I don't want to see crying and whining. And when you come home from school exhausted and don't want to do your chores, I'm not going to have pity. You're not going to get to go lay down. You're going to go do your chores. You're going to go do your homework. You're going to go practice your music. And your natural consequence of not going to bed is you're going to be exhausted. Okay. So routines help kids to learn how to be diligent and how to look forward to the things that they're going to do. So I have ADHD. I'm fairly certain a couple of my kids have ADHD. Routines and structure are really good for neurodivergent kids, whether they're autistic, whether they have Asperger's, whether they are on the spectrum in any way, ADHD, routines and structure and work. Again, that's where the family meeting comes in. Work with the kids to create that structure because I don't say you have to do A, B, C, D, and E today between the hours of 5 and 6:30 p.m. I say, these are the things that need to be done for the week. You tell me when it's going to work. And I actually have my older kids make their own schedules. When are you going to do what you're going to do? Now, when you do it, it's your responsibility to make sure we know that it's done so that we can check it. Because when you've got littles in the house, if somebody's responsible for cleaning the basement bathroom or cleaning up the basement where the toys are, and the kids of the little ones have gone down there and dumped toys all over the floor right after you cleaned it, who's going to get in trouble? That's right, you are. So, allowing the children to take ownership of what it is they're doing helps them to develop a sense of responsibility and accountability. Choose action over talking. And I fall victim to this a lot because I'm one of those parents that likes to talk about why. I like to ask questions. Well, why didn't you do it? You knew you were supposed to do it. I told, yeah, they did. They knew they were supposed to do it. I told them to do it. They have it written down. Now it's time for action. So instead of lecturing, okay, well, you know what the consequence is. We're moving on. Don't go back and forth with them. Don't argue with them because not only does that undermine the position that you set when everybody agreed, it gives them a feeling that they can delay either the punishment or the consequence or that they can talk you out of it. And sometimes it does work, right? Because I get busy and I get distracted and they don't get their consequence because I've gone back and forth with them for 20 minutes with time I didn't have. Action over speaking. Parental consistency actually is one of the primary factors that determines children's outcomes in their lives. And that's why I say if your child is, 5, you can start now. If your child is 10, you can start now. If your child is a teenager, you can start now. And just understand that when you're dealing with a much older child, a lot of what's going to have to be modeled is consistency from you and on your end. You may have to say, I'm really sorry that I allowed you to believe that I was the maid and that it was my job to cook and clean and go to work and pay all the bills and provide you with everything that you desire. And it was your job to sit back and accept that. But it's really my job to prepare you for life. And as a result of that, these are now your responsibilities. Teach them, show them, train them on how to do it, consistently enforce it. And I got to say, when you're starting with teenagers, I completely get that it's going to be hard. And for a lot of us, we grew up, and I don't know about you, but I was very much more of a latchkey kid, grew up taking care of my siblings, doing a lot, and I felt guilt about that. I felt like my kids should be kids. They should get time to play. They should be responsible for their homework. And yes, kids are not, supposed to be out here washing cars and power washing the house and laying bricks and, harvesting, crops now because this is 2024. We know that that's why they had summers back in the day because that's what the kids' jobs were. But our kids are overscheduled and they're doing a lot of activities, a lot of things that they want to do, a lot of things that cost us money. And it's really important that they build discipline and accountability around those things and not entitlement. And so part of that is allowing them to take ownership for things that are reasonable for them at their age. And I've talked about this before, having my 0 to 3-year-olds, and I really mean 0 because like when my son was like 9 or 10 months, we started him stacking his toys back in their little blocks before we put them away. And we showed him us putting them away. I'm not saying this holds. What I'm saying is this is what we did. 3 to 5, now you're responsible for putting your clothes in the hamper, making sure that you don't leave your towel laying on the floor of the bathroom. We had low hooks in our old house. In this house, my son is still too short to put it up. He has to get his big brother to put it up. 5 to 7, we started with taking out small trash cans and sweeping. 7 to 10, it's learning to do dishes, wiping the table. Everyone is always responsible, except babies for their own bed and their own toys. And we help them, right, when they're not old enough to do it themselves, but we show them how to do it so consistently that it becomes part of their routine. What I'm trying to say is that it's not too late to start. And if you've started and you're tired, I get it because a lot of people had these routines, had these things going for them. And then during the pandemic, everything fell off because everything was everywhere all at once. And now it's been, 3, 4, and 5 years. You've got tweens or older teens, and you don't know how to get them back into it. You don't know what's age appropriate. You just never leveled them up on what their responsibilities are. I used an online list to try to figure out what age appropriate chores were. I went and updated them every now and again, and I literally just leveled the kids up on the chores. And part of that is having the family meetings, reminding the kids that they are responsible for helping to take care of and maintain the home in which we all live. They are also responsible and accountable as they get older, right? For communicating with us about the things that they want to do, the things that they have on their schedule, and about their desired hangouts with friends. I had to tell my 10-year-old, I'm like, no, I'm not going to drop everything and rush you home so you can have an online. He had a little Zoom call set up with his buddy that he didn't tell us about until 20 minutes before it started. And this is just a way that we are working to train our children on accountability and responsibility for self. Being consistent with our messaging, enforcing what we say we will enforce, doing what we say we will do, we build trust with them too. We teach them that we can be relied on. And like they don't know that's what they're learning. They think they're learning that you're the meanest mom, right? They think they're learning that none of their friends' parents are like this. So why are you? They think they're learning that they wish the stork took them to the house across the street. But what they're learning is that they can rely on you, that you will be there, that you are going to teach them what they need to know, and that they can trust what you say. And that's really a huge thing, especially when kids get into the teenage years. Without consistency, kids and especially tweens and teens feel like they're living on a seesaw and they don't know what they're going to be punished for. This gets really hard as our kids move into the space of more self autonomy, where they're going out with their friends on their own, right? Or where they're being able, especially things like learning how to drive. If you have not established consistency in your communications, you're going to get a lot more boundary pushing and stomping. And I'm not saying this as someone who, is an expert or authority. I'm saying this based on the data and the research. This is not my opinion, right? The other thing about it is if you do not have that communication style with your kids, if they don't know that they can trust you, if you say one thing one day and another thing another day, they're going to be very anxious and very stressed out about what they can and cannot expect from you. And that level of anxiety in those tween and teen years where they also have all of the external pressures. And we know, I've talked about social media. This isn't what we're here to talk about today, but I am consistent in my messaging around that. No social media until you're 16. And after 16, you have to be friends with me. It just is what it is. I'm not stalking. I'm not, hacking their pages. I'm not reading their diaries, but it is important for me to monitor social media use and make sure that it's reasonable. I also still monitor screen time for my teens, for my big kids. They need their sleep. That is a consistent routine in my life. I do not allow tablets, phones, computers in the rooms after bedtime. Unless you have a project and we know what you're working on, when it's time for you to go to bed and wind down, it's time for me to get all that technology. And you can have a good old fashioned book, you can have your Bible, you can have your journal. But what you cannot have is a blue screen overstimulating you so that you will not sleep and you will miss the bus. And then I will have to deviate from my routine to take you to school. Structure and consistency matter because they help kids build trust. It actually reduces anxiety, even if they're frustrated with you, even if they don't like it, they will actually appreciate it. If you have a teen that's anxious, and a lot of us have teens who are anxious, let's be real. Pandemic created a lot of anxiety. But if you have teens who are also a little angry and reactive, especially when it comes time for discipline, who suffer from depression or who are irritable and frustrated with you and kind of you're having power struggles, they have overreactions to what seem to you to be minor problems, and they also have memory issues, lack of concentration. I strongly encourage you to look at places in your routine where you have not built consistency because what it what really happens is that when teens are overstimulated and when they don't have that trust that what you have said is what you're going to do, their nervous system takes over and they become reactive instead of responsive. And I understand for the parents who felt like, well, I really didn't do much with them during the pandemic. I didn't require this, I didn't require that. So me going back and doing it now makes me look like a hypocrite. Say that and apologize to them and then move on and set your boundary and set your rule and be consistent. Everyone in the family loses when parents aren't consistent. The child, because there's there we know as parents situations come up and there's one child that'll get away with something that another child can't get away with, right? Because it's the time and it's how we're feeling. They've caught us on a good day, we got a little extra money, we're in a better mood, we got off work early, whatever it is, they ask us, we say yes. The next day we got stuck in traffic, we were late, we got in trouble, we came home, the car's on E, we didn't feel like going to the gas station, we left our whatever. We say no to the other kid. That creates sibling rivalries and the perception of favoritism. The other issue is when parents are not consistent with each other. So, family meeting is not just the whole family. Family meeting also needs to be time with the parents. The parents need to be on the same page about what they believe is going on with the kids, what their answers are going to be to certain situations, because every child, every age has different things. Every child has different things. And we can't always prepare or have a rule for everything in advance. But if the parents are communicating, and this does include caregivers, if you have smaller children, right, especially if they have attachment issues, for those of you who do foster care, or for those of you who have children who have come in through adoption or something like that, you have to be very clear that you're on the same page with enforcing boundaries as your caregivers, wherever the kids are. Now, school is going to be different. The teachers are not parenting, but daycares, small care centers, and facilities, you need to be clear that there are certain things, especially, I'm talking here about the kids really 5 and under. They're getting discipline and they're getting consistent boundaries around certain things, whether it's hitting, whether it's spitting, whether it's being too cuddly, right? Or over affectionate. They need consistent boundaries and consistent follow through. And the thing about communication between parents is we all know how triangulation works, and it's not just kids with attachment disorders that are triangulating. It's our regular, degular, normal kids. When they figure out something's up between mom and dad and they're not talking, they're going to try to milk it for all it's worth. So you have to start communicating. You got to fix it and you got to communicate. And I am very loath to get into, you know, because a lot of people are dealing with issues in their marriages. And I want to be very, very clear. There is no condemnation if you're having issues, but you have to learn how to co parent in a way that is beneficial for your children. And part of that is going to be consistency, consistency, consistency. And here I'm talking to moms because more often than not, moms want to give exceptions. Mom wants to relax the rules for somebody, and dad's getting frustrated because he's like, well, look, we made the rule. We talked about the rule. This is the rule. What's the problem? When one person becomes the heavy and the other person becomes the easy, it makes it hard for the parents to not resent each other. And it makes it really easy for the kid to start manipulating and running roughshod over the rules and the boundaries that have been set up. So it really does affect the relationship between the kids and their parents, because They're manipulating one and they're resentful of the other because they're having to manipulate the one. So I really want to encourage you, if you're having that problem in your marriage, to try to sit down, and if you are having legitimate issues, with a neutral third party, to talk about how to come up with a strategy where you all can communicate with each other, because you're going to have to start talking to each other. You cannot do your communicating through your children. When that happens, the marriage is breaking down and the relationships that you have with your children are breaking down. And the children are really suffering, even though they seem fine, because they may be having the time of their lives triangulating the two of you, creating more problems between the two of you because they don't know any better. Children are inherently self interested. It's our job to teach them how important it is to care and be empathetic about the effect that our behavior has on other people. And that requires effective communication. I know that a lot of parents don't like to hear how important this is. I know that a lot of parents think I'm tired and I'm overwhelmed and I don't know how I can start this from a place of never having done it. But I want to encourage you tonight that if you have not considered it, that you should consider simply sitting down and starting from a place of, what is my child doing now? That is a pain point. And what should I do to address that? Because that's usually the best place to start. Again, you have to start small. You can't come in one day with a list of 27 commandments that your child has to do, a 5-page long chore chart that they have to complete every week, and new rules for how they're going to eat, sleep, live, and exist in the world. You have to be communicative with them about what the issues are that you're trying to address. And especially if they're over maybe 12, you need to be communicating back and forth with them around the boundaries, the rules, and the consequences. Like, they need to have a say in that and they need to have buy in. Now, if they just want to be recalcitrant and say, no, I've never done it, I'm not doing it, you're going to have to do what you're going to have to do. And I'm not, and I overstand how difficult it can be to start from nothing. But I want to encourage you that for your sanity, for the sake of your marriage or relationship, and for the sake of your children, to consider the importance of being consistent. All right, guys, that's all I got tonight. I got to go work on my summer chore charts because these kids have to clean every day now, because I will not live in a house that is falling down around my ears. And I pray that you will not be doing that either. Remember, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. And you have to choose wisely. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next week for Wisdom Wednesday. Good night.